So thank you, everyone. Welcome, bienvenue to the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture and Nova Scotia Sea Farmers digital series. Today's session on improving quality and best practices in the live lobster industry. My name is Valerie Lalonde. I'm the Industry Liaison Officer for Université Sainte-Anne, and I'll be today's moderator. So first off, we'll have a quick message from Minister Keith Colwell. So please welcome and joining him.
Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here as Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture for this important topic today, quality and best practices in live lobster industry. I realize that a lot of people have registered for this, and I can remember the early days and when I was talking about quality and quality programs, lobster handling course, and some of the very interesting conversations we had around that. And I'm pleased to see the industry is really stepping up to the plate to ensure that we can supply a high quality lobster live, or indeed that we can hold for a long period of time for processing. It's very important to our economy, very important to all the fishers, and very important to our processing and to our province. The fishing industry in the province of Nova Scotia is the biggest employer when you take into consideration all the fishermen, all the facilities of process, and all the support industries. That is something. We lead the province in exports with approximately 36% of the total exports out of the province, a position we didn't have 8 years ago. I'm very proud of that and very proud of our industry, how we work together to make that happen. I want to thank the Farm Credit Canada and the Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board for their continued support. I also want to thank the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia being partners in this digital series. It's nice to see our whole industry working together to improve our industry and make opportunities and careers for young people in our province as we grow, and we grow in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way. There's a lot of things we have to discuss, but quality is one of the things that will give us the biggest return at the wharf and all the way through our value chain. When we market our products all over the world, we are known for the high quality product we have. And the better quality we can produce, the bigger price we can get at the wharf and from our customers, ultimately helping Nova Scotia's economy. Just think that we've come from $974 million approximately to $2.3 billion in exports to lead the country in exports in fisheries. And I believe we were third place 8 years ago. And I can remember from the first meetings I went to when lobster was $3 a pound, and they did a big study which was didn't really tackle the problem of marketing. So we've taken the marketing seriously, and between our team and the industry has been great results. And I again want to thank everybody for the great work they've done on that. So enjoy your presentation today, the Université Sainte-Anne, who's been a great partner with us through this whole quality process. And their new Lobster Center for Excellence will, I think, give us a lasting opportunity to make sure our lobsters are the best in the world, which they already are, but anything we can improve the quality to our customer, we need to do. So thank you for participating today, and make sure you share the quality message with all your colleagues. Have a great day.
Thank you, Minister Colwell, for these words. So first, before jumping into the presentation, a few Zoom housekeeping points. So please have your audio and video turned off during the webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You can also use the chat function for questions throughout the webinar. And the chat and Q&A will be monitored throughout the session and addressed during the live Q&A session happening at the end of the presentation. So again, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsors, Farm Credit of Canada and the Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board. So I welcome you to join and look at their websites for all the amazing work they're doing. And we have a quick video for the Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board.
Fisheries and Aquaculture Loan Board provides financing for fisheries and for businesses, for folks wanting to enter the industry, for new entrants, and really anyone who doesn't have the ability to get financing through a traditional commercial bank.
We really are here to support the fisheries and aquaculture industry, and we really want to have a vibrant rural community in Nova Scotia.
I've known of the Fisheries Loan Board pretty well ever since they've been in business. I've been working personally with them since 2000, so 21 years.
To have the same clients coming back because they put their faith in us to be able to finance their projects, to be able to help them through whatever they're going through. There's difficult times sometimes in the industry, and we're here to support them and work through it with them.
They know the industry. They're a fisherman's loan board. They know the fishermen, they know the industry.
You get to know the fishermen, you know their families, you talk to them, you know how their businesses work, and to see them succeed is what we're there for.
It's really fantastic to hear the success stories, to be able to go out and see their enterprises and what they're building and what they have brought back to their communities.
We have long-term interest rates, which really help the fisher. It lowers their payments. We support them from the beginning of their start in the industry right through to existing fishers who are looking to buy new boats, new licenses.
Whatever we need, they will talk to us, and if they can help us, they will.
When you have a young fisher who has worked on the back of the boat, they've saved their money for a deposit, they apply to the board, it's their dream to own their own fishing enterprise, and when their loan gets approved, to see them start their career in the fishing industry, it's very rewarding.
Awesome, great video. So today's session panelists are from Université Sainte-Anne. So we have Dan Lane, Michelle Theriot, Maria Diocastella, and Emily Knighton. And we're also delighted to have from the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, Adam Muggeridge. Let's not forget the upcoming session for the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture and Nova Scotia Sea Farmers digital series. So the next session will be the Minister's Seafood and Sportfish Industry Awards on Thursday, April 22nd from noon to 1:30 p.m. So on that, I'll introduce the first speaker. It's going to be Adam Muggeridge from the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. So Adam is a fisheries biologist with the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, based in his hometown of Sydney, Nova Scotia. He began his career with an SDFA as a coastal resource coordinator for Cape Breton and Victoria counties in June 2018. A graduate of Dalhousie University's marine biology program, Adam spent 13 years working in the commercial fisheries in Cape Breton prior to his role with an SDFA. Here, he gained a great deal of experience in several diverse fields of the seafood industry, including new fisheries development and fisheries management issues, innovation within the industry, fish processing, sales and marketing, aquaculture, and species at risk concerns. As a fisheries biologist, Adam spends much of his time on lobster science issues and projects aimed at improving the quality within Nova Scotia's live lobster industry and ultimately increasing the value of the fishery within the province. So the mic is up for you, Adam.
Thanks, Valerie. Thanks for the introduction. I'm just going to share my screen here if I can. Okay, how's that? Great. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. And again, thanks, Valerie, for the introduction. My name is Adam Muggeridge, fisheries biologist with the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. As Valerie stated, a large part of what I focus on day to day involves lobster quality and best practices in the industry, which fittingly is the topic of this webinar. So I'll touch briefly today on just some of the projects over the last few years that the Department of Fisheries has either led, invested in, or partnered with other excellent organizations to make happen. again, I want to echo what Minister Caldwell said about the quality message. Everything we're going to hear today is really designed at improving quality, which is ultimately designed for to increase the value of our lobster fishery and really to drive economic growth in the fishery and in our coastal communities. For some of these items that I'm about to speak on, I won't go into too much detail. Other speakers will be covering them more than I will, Dan, Maria, and Michelle. But I will speak to the high-level points just to give an indication of some of the initiatives the department has been involved in related to live lobster quality. Before I get into some of the projects, I just wanted to, I thought I'd provide some recent export statistics, fairly new for 2020 regarding live lobster exports. So first off, this is not a shocker to anyone, live lobster is Nova Scotia's single most valuable product, accounting for 41% of Nova Scotia's total seafood exports, which in 2020 were $2 billion. And in both 2020 and the previous year, lobster represented 41% of the sales. So there was no change those 2 years. So as you can see, at 822 million, total exports were actually down 13% in 2020 compared to 2019, where export sales were 947 million. Obviously, this can be attributed to the global pandemic. And as you can see on the black line, beginning in February, we did see a steep decline in export sales compared to 2019, and that never really did, the values never really did catch up to the 2019 export sales until about August, September, and still there was a lag. Secondly, in terms of average price overall, the average price was down in 2020, 3%. It was down from the 2019 value of $19.34 to $18.85 in 2020. Again, if we look month to month on this chart here, you can see the year started off well, where average price values were higher in January and February. But it really, following February, it really lagged behind the 2019 prices for the rest of the year, and it really never caught up, with the exception of September and November. Now, switching gears to, again, the lobster quality initiatives that I mentioned, I briefly want to touch on the Catch to Plate program, which many of you may have heard of or been involved in. The Catch to Plate program initiative was a pilot project which ran from 2014 until 2018, and it involved several associations from across the province and was led by perennial Université Sainte-Anne. During this project, several things were looked at, including current handling practices, holding practices, both on board vessels and on the wharf as well, dockside. Onboard grading was looked at in some areas. Cold chain logistics, so shipping, buyers, looking at, again, things like keeping temperatures low, that was assessed. And there was a marketing and consumer feedback portion of this as well, whereby consumers would provide their feedback through a website called mynslobster.ca. So people could log on and see a picture of the harvester who purchased or who caught their lobster that they were eating. So from this project, we learned a lot of valuable information. And it's this information that we're sort of building on as we go forward, and informs us of a lot of the different research that we're doing today. I'll touch briefly on the Atlantic Lobster Molt and Quality program, but I won't go into too much detail about this because actually Dan's presentation is about this, and so he'll go into more detail than I will. But I will mention that the Atlantic Lobster Molt and Quality program has been in place since around 2005. And it involves pre-season sampling for lobsters in several parts of LFA 33 and 34, including both inshore and offshore sites. Again, a big shout out to Coldwater Lobster Association on this, who have been doing the work, going to sea, collecting the information, really providing some really useful information on this. The idea here for the Atlantic Lobster Molt and Quality program is to collect biological information of lobsters leading up to the season opening in November, in order to predict the quality for the commercial fishery and learn about what molt stage recovery lobsters are in. Again, Dan will be looking at data from 2005 till today, and seeing how this can be used for predictive modeling. Again, I'll leave it at that, but again, Dan's going to talk more in detail about that. The Lobster Quality Certification Program, which hopefully many of you are familiar with or have heard of, have some questions about. Again, not going to go into too much detail on this. Maria is going to give a short presentation on this. But I do want to mention just basically what it is. It's a voluntary program involving a series of best practices in lobster handling and holding. And it involves assessing lobster biology and water quality, designed to give your buyers, your live lobster buyers, some level of assurance that you're doing everything you can to provide the highest quality lobster possible. As part of the certification program, there is a formal certification process, an audit by a third party, SAI Global. I should also mention that besides live lobster, quality criteria has been developed for processed lobster and oysters, and there are several other species that are going to be following this, and that's being led by Perennia. Also want to mention the Nova Scotia Seafood brand, which I'm sure many are familiar with. The promotion of certified companies through the Nova Scotia Seafood brand and the branding activities and promotional events internationally will be part of the program. And again, use of this brand by certified companies, I think, will be key to moving this initiative forward. Lobster handling courses. I'm sure many people joining in on this session have either taken a lobster handling course or certainly at least know about the courses. And again, I won't go into any detail. I'll leave this to Michelle, who knows way more than I do about these courses. But I did want to mention that the lobster quality handling courses, were ultimately designed to promote best practices in lobster handling and holding, all designed to improve quality, to reduce mortalities, and really to, as I said earlier, increase the value of live lobster in our province. Over the years, several value chain specific versions have been designed, versions 1.0, 2, 3. And they've been developed, again, either based land-based buyer or harvester in mind. Again, those specific versions. Again, it demonstrates that within the province, we take lobster quality seriously. As you probably know, every lobster licensed buyer must demonstrate someone on staff has taken the course, an up-to-date course, and needs to keep that commitment in order to meet the license requirements. Another very interesting project that I'll mention is the a lobster meat yield and grading project, which is ongoing now, and it's being led by Perennia, who is working in partnership with Ingenuity Inc. Essentially, they're working on development of a handheld tool that can help determine meat yield of an individual lobster. So this is based on the feedback, much feedback from industry, who I've heard many times. It's determining lobster quality and meat yield is very subjective, and development of a tool that can do this reliably and be able to predict meat yield is something that the industry has said that it needs. So we've responded. Currently, we have a working prototype that exists. It's third generation, or perhaps even more. It's currently being tested in an industrial setting. And essentially, we're trying to assess, A, does it work? Does it work quicker and better than traditional methods like sampling for bricks? And then I guess the other key thing is, does it work in an industrial setting? Can it handle the environment, the elements being exposed to the wet conditions and whatnot? So very interesting project, and looking forward to the results of that. I guess besides projects in recent years, Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture has supported lobster quality mainly through the investments via the Atlantic Fisheries Fund. There have been many, probably numbering in the hundreds of projects, although most of these projects haven't been publicly announced, so I can't go into too much detail about the specifics of them. But what I can say is that for individual live lobster projects, we've invested over $10 million. And some of these projects range from land-based handling improvements. So this could be things like investments in automatic graders on shore, land-based water quality improvements. So this could be improved aeration or refrigeration in lobster holding facilities. Science partnerships with, again, there's several partnerships that have been supported with multiple researchers, multiple organizations and associations across the province. On-vessel handling and holding practices as well. So this probably represents about half of all of the projects that are mentioned here in terms of value. But this would be things like water quality improvement on board vessels, live wells, sorting tables on the vessels, and again represents individual harvesters that have accessed the Atlantic Fisheries Fund and that we've supported. Besides individual projects, we have also, through Atlantic Fisheries Fund, supported third-party live lobster investments to the tune of $23.7 million. So these have been publicly announced, so I can provide the details of these. But these investments include projects with cold water lobster. Again, looking at lobster quality enhancement on board vessels. So again, things like holding, aeration, and water quality monitoring. Again, that's being delivered through the association to their members. Brazil Rock LFA 3334 Lobster Association. Again, creating functioning live wells on board lobster vessels, being managed by that association for their members. And the Nova Scotia Seafood Alliance, again, to provide technical and infrastructure upgrades to the companies that are part of the alliance, and many of which are live lobster holding facilities. Again, the idea of going with the third-party group is for the groups or associations to deliver the project and work with their members to achieve some of the similar projects that were outlined on the previous slide. So with that, that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Valerie now.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam, for your presentation. Next, we'll go to 3 panelists from Université Sainte-Anne, Dan Lane, Michelle Theriault, and Maria Dio-Castella. So Dr. Lane is Interim Director of Université Sainte-Anne's Lobster Quality Research and Innovation Center and Adjunct Professor with the Marine Research Center in Cape Breton. His research focuses on decision-making processes, simulation modeling, and control of dynamic systems in the management of Canada's coastal zone, including coastal climate change, fisheries, aquaculture, and oceans policy analysis. His current research is on the modeling and analysis of quality for live lobster and value enhancement of the Nova Scotia commercial lobster sector. In 2016, Dr. Lane retired as Professor Emeritus after 30 years at the Telfer School of Management of the University of Ottawa. He is Principal Investigator and Chair of the Oceans Management Research Network, a joint initiative program of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. He is currently chair of the board of directors of the International Ocean Institute for Canada and a former member of the board of the Canadian Fisheries Research Network. Dr. Lane has prepared proceedings for the World Fisheries Congress, major reports for the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea on Quota Management Systems, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Fisheries Committee on the Evolution of Fisheries Management, Performance and Fisheries Management, and Climate Change. Also, we have Michelle Theriault. So Michelle is the director of Université Sainte-Anne's Marine Research Center and Satellite Campus in Petit-de-Gras in Nova Scotia. Has over 25 years of experience in the lobster industry. She completed a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology from Dalhousie University and an industry-sponsored Master's of Science in Veterinary Medicine from UPEI. Michelle spent the first 10 years of her career as a lobster biologist and biology manager at a live lobster storage facility in Nova Scotia as part of a team responsible for quality and inventory management for several millions of pounds of lobster per year. Michelle was instrumental in establishing the Marine Research Center, a self-funded center known for specialization with American lobster. This center conducts applied research and training to support economic growth and development within the fishing and aquaculture industries in Nova Scotia, including the development and delivery of the Nova Scotia lobster handling courses. And we also have the pleasure of having Maria Duo-Castella. So Maria, she's an industrial chemical engineer and has been working with quality, safety, and environmental management systems for over a decade, from implementation to maintenance and audit in a wide diversity of industries. She has been living and working in Nova Scotia for the past 5 years and currently acts as manager of the Live Lobster Quality Certification Program at Université Sainte-Anne. So then it's up to you. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci bien Valérie et bienvenue à Petit-de-Gras et le Centre de Recherche Marine. My name is Dan Lane. It's a pleasure to be here. I am an interim director of the Lobster Quality Research and Innovation Center, what we fondly refer to as le CRIC. And I have the good opportunity to tell you about the CRIC and the fact that a year ago, the minister announced that we became a center to work with and commit to enhancing value in the industry around lobster quality. I want to be able to tell you, since this is our first opportunity to get the word out about the Lobster Quality Research and Innovation Center at Sainte-Anne, I want to tell you a little bit about some of the infrastructure research that we have, as well as our exciting partnership with industry and government and our advisory board. We have 3 basic elements to the CRIC. First of all, our research programs, which are applied and continuing research around lobster quality and the determinants of lobster quality throughout the supply chain. The training and outreach program regarding lobster handling and holding and the accredited work that we do around the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture training sessions. And thirdly, the quality certification program that promotes high quality standards and enhances our industry's international reputation. This is the Lobster Quality Research and Innovation Center. My job is to tell you a little bit about our research work. So I want to talk to you about 4 components. First of all, our supply chain work around traditional processes of air freight of lobster, live lobster into international markets. Our lobster survey and sampling program that we carry out each year, commonly called, as Adam had referred to, the ALMQ, the Atlantic Lobster Mold Quality Work. This is a continuation of that work that was done earlier. I'll tell you a bit about that in more detail later as well. Thirdly, work around lobster decision-making and modeling that we are proposing to do around what the impacts of quality, what the impacts of good protocols and training are to make lobster quality a higher value product. And lastly, the notion of the dynamics of the Nova Scotia lobster sector. We'll be looking at that and looking at how lobster gets from harvest all the way to the table for lobster products to clients. So let me begin by asking you a question. This is a question that we have about what you know about the Université Sainte-Anne and our work on lobster. So were you aware that the university had an active research program on lobster? I'm not going to bias the answer to that, and I'm sure you'll have some feedback that we would all like to see. We're hoping by this presentation that you'll learn a little bit more about what we are doing and how the lobster sector can get involved in our work. Valerie shortly is going to show us what results you've responded to, what you previously know about Sainte-Anne that we are going to address in this presentation. This is great news. You know something about us. Let me carry on and tell you a little bit about the 4 elements of the research program before I hand it off to my colleagues that will tell you more about the other elements of the center. First of all, with respect to the supply chain analysis, this work has been in progress for some time. We're now getting more involved in looking at and investigating the gaps and the issues within the supply chain for live lobster around the traditional supply chain using air freight. We're also looking deeply in connecting this to what we do in our training programs around what are the best practices for handling, holding, and shipping live lobster. So we're connecting the notion that what we learned from our research on the supply chain can help us provide industry back with the information that we learn about to help them do a better job and to improve the value of our lobster going to international markets. Right now, we're in the laboratory simulation phase of the project, and we will be proceeding as we are right now, looking at an industry survey that will be coming your way on what you feel is important about lobster quality within the supply chain. Lastly, in 2022, we'll be doing some field testing around sending exports out and following them closely regarding our protocols and how our best practices are doing relative to the supply chain. With respect to what we often refer to as the LMQ, in work that we do in sampling lobster pre-season and in season, in lobster fishing areas 33 and 34 are major fishing areas for lobster. This has been a continuation of work, as Adam had noted, since the early 2000s, where we're looking at individual lobsters and analysis of their Brix levels and how that compares to meat yield. We have ongoing studies. Shout out here to our new postdoc at the lab in Church Point, Ziad Mandani, who's looking at a meat yield study to help us augment our understanding about what Brix levels translates to in terms of actual meat yield for lobsters. And lastly, the notion of what we learned from our preseason surveys can tell us something about what the quality predictions are as of a help to industry going into a new season. So we're looking at that and what that might mean relative to how decisions are made within the industry with respect to the sampling survey results. Lastly, I'll mention quickly the notion of what we're doing on descriptive modeling around the lobster sector with respect to how decisions are made. So if we know information about quality, how does that affect our decisions with respect to product development in lobster? What does the sector look like if we simulate it from a modeling perspective and impose things like what are the impacts as a result of a global pandemic, and how can we see how we can react to that and be prepared for that? Lobster market dynamics, including prices. We know that the dynamic annually is fairly consistent in some ways, although it fluctuates in sizes, if you will, with respect to prices and demand for markets. So we want to look at how we can model that and see the impacts of that overall. Decision analysis based on quality, how does that change what we do in terms of processing product versus live market product? And then looking at assessing in advance what the value of our live lobster products are and getting prepared for how that will affect the market. So I'm going to pass this on to Michelle Thériault, who's out in the lab here in the Marine Research Center. Michelle, over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. Like Dan mentioned, we're both here at our campus in Petit de Gras. He's in our office buildings and I'm outside in our Marine Center, and you see behind me some of the storage tanks that we use for our research projects here with Lobster. Like Dan mentioned, I've been working very closely with the lobster quality courses. During the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to present the courses to hundreds of people in the industry. And even in the last year, we've kept going since COVID. We switched primarily to an online delivery model using Zoom or Teams, and that's worked quite well. So we've actually had, another several more hundreds of people come through the program. And those of you that have taken some of the courses with me before, know that I like to talk about lobster biology, maybe a bit too much sometimes. You'll be happy to know that I only have 5 minutes today, so it's probably, I'll just put that up front. But the reason I still enjoy, one of the reasons I still enjoy getting out and talking to people through these courses is, I like to take the opportunity to remind people, how unique our lobster is, but also again, how unique that our live industry is here in Nova Scotia. Another reason that I do like to continue to do these courses is because of all the feedback that I get from all kinds of different people that work in the industry, from truck drivers to packers, graders, people who work in sales, fishermen. I mean, and everybody, a lot of people, have comments, and everyone has a unique perspective. And I do really appreciate the comments and the feedback that I get back, and even the questions. And there's a lot of times that there's a lot of questions that I don't know the answer to, but like I tell people, I do write them down. I have lists and lists and lists actually of questions just from the last year of courses. And, it's just a reminder about, even though we've been studying lobster for decades, there is still so much that we don't understand and that we don't know, especially when it comes to things that have a direct impact on the industry and the practices in the industry that impact on quality. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why I am excited about this new project at Sainte-Anne and the development of the CRIC, because it is, for me, hopefully, my hope is that we finally get to do some of this research targeted towards industry-related topics. And we will get to answer some of these questions that the industry has had over the years and are still outstanding. And, they range from there's a whole range of different types of questions that, that we still have left to answer. And some are, serious scientific questions, and some are, serious industry best practices questions, like, questions about bait, questions about, ice usage, questions about temperature and acclimation and all of those things. Those are some of the serious ones. I also keep a list of questions of interest and curiosity, and like apparently there's a spot on a lobster that you can push that you can cause it to urinate, and I thought that's probably one of the funniest questions that I've ever been asked. I don't know where it is yet, but maybe in the course of the next few years we'll find that out. But anyway, so yeah, I guess, and like I said, so my goal and my hope is that we finally get to answer some of these questions, and I really do feel like at Sainte-Anne and through the CRIC that we're well positioned to do this. And we have a unique setup with our different centers that you're going to hear a bit more about later on, and this this new applied research program that we're developing, that we can have this R&D and this research that's happening that will help to work directly to validate our best practices and strengthen the material that we're presenting in these courses. And then we have our courses to, as a way to directly disseminate this information back to the industry. And also to have, through these courses and the feedback that we get from people like you and people involved in all different aspects of the industry, that really does help us as a guide for our future research. So it's just kind of like a circle that that keeps going. So anyway, so that's my short presentation. I'm going to pass off the mic to Maria, and she's going to talk about another program that's designed to help strengthen the industry.
Thank you, Michelle. Merci. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Bonjour à tout le monde. Bon après-midi. Bienvenue. My name is Maria. I'm the coordinator for the Nova Scotia Live Lobster Quality Certification Program in the campus in Church Point. We had the opportunity last year to present the program at the minister conferences. And today I'll give a brief introduction for those that are not familiar with the program. And at the end, I'll give you a couple of updates. So in this slide, in the corner, you have this logo that probably you all know. And this is the logo for the Nova Scotia Seafood Quality Program brand. It's been a program launched and promoted by the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. It's been greatly promoted, and it's still promoted immensely at a national and international level. So from Université Sainte-Anne, we have developed a series of guidelines with the highest quality standards that we could develop for the live lobster industry. And what we are trying to achieve with these guidelines, companies that are interested in improving their quality and make a step forward in their quality, we present these guidelines, and they can try to meet this, that they can work and meet these requirements. And those companies that are going to meet these requirements and they're going to be certified under this program, they're going to be like the representatives. They're going to be the ambassadors of the Nova Scotia Seafood brand, and they're going to be able to use this logo for their marketing purposes, to sell their quality, to promote their business. So this program is, we're talking about exporters, but we're talking also about suppliers and even fishermen that are holding lobster for more than 24 hours. So we're trying to improve the quality through the supply chain. So the companies that want to engage with this program and are interested in improving their quality and they're meeting these criteria, after that step, they have to go through an annual audit. This is not performed by Université Sainte-Anne. This is performed by a third accredited body, SAI Global. And this is just to ensure the compliance of their standard quality level. For those that are not familiar with the program, we're not going to get into detail, but just on a grosso modo, letting you know that the main requirements are touching these points. So proper handling at all times, employees training, water quality control, holding conditions, lobster quality, like both biological conditions and physical, traceability, and shipping conditions. Last year, in fact, in general, we have been receiving very good feedback from industry, like all that involves improving quality is very well received. Last year, we had a few companies that were working towards certification. Unfortunately, we had to cancel due to the pandemic. And some of these companies and new ones, we're working hard right now so we can go through this certification process. So we're hoping that very soon, end of spring, beginning of summer, we'll be able to reach you and letting you know that we have the first companies that have been accredited and are going to be our ambassadors for the Nova Scotia Seafood brand, specifically for the live lobster. And finally, just letting you know that there's financial incentives that have been extended up to October 2022. These specific incentives are for audits. And finally, though, you have here my contact. If you're interested in the program, you can contact me by email, telephone, or you can go to Université Sainte-Anne webpage. The role of Université Sainte-Anne is coordinating the program, but also we can give you all kind of technical support. We can offer you training and anything that we can help to get your company towards this certification and improving the quality of your facilities and your business. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Michelle. It's back to me, I think, Valerie, right? Very good. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the resources that we have at the Université Sainte-Anne and the Lobster Quality Research and Innovation Center. These take a form of facilities, reports, team, and some of our links, in particular the team. We're excited about this. We have a strong team developing through the Université Sainte-Anne and our multiple laboratories around the province. I'll tell you a little bit about those in a second. First of all, let me focus on, you've seen some of our team members already from the university in this presentation, but I want to mention to you about our Industry and Government Advisory Board. This is what this looks like. Our advisory board is key to our operations and how we develop our research program and provide information back to the industry and to the public about what we do. The advisory board is led by two co-chairs, one from the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, and the other from as vice president of the Université Sainte-Anne. That's Kenneth DeVoe, and the executive from the NSDFA is Bruce Osborne. These people are key in leading us to this point and have brought together a key group of industry members and government members that are part of this group overall. That includes Adam, who's part of our presentation here today, by the way. We also have support through our science faculty at the Université Sainte-Anne and from Valerie, who is our industrial liaison officer as part of her work as the board secretary. At the top level, we have more key members of the Université Sainte-Anne. That includes our technology transfer officer, our laboratory director, Michelle, who you know, as well as, and a shout out here to Victoria Tobin, our new technician working at the lab with Michelle. And the new PI, a new principal investigator as a research lead for the work that will be carried out, not just at our lab here at the Marine Research Center in Petit de Gras, but also in Church Point. That person, we're excited about the fact that he may be very close to joining our team and being part of this in the lead on research. And lastly, there you see in the right, that's that interim director fellow. That would be me for the time being, who's dealing with knowledge mobilization, communication of the research components, and getting that information out. The key part of our advisory board has to be among our government and industry members, including harvesting reps, processors and exporters, community representatives from our First Nations, and the government members that you see there. All of those groups together, all of those members form the Research Advisory Subcommittee that help us in our discussions with them around the kind of research that we're doing and that we presented briefly to you in this presentation here. Okay, I want to ask you another question related to our facilities for lobsters at the Université Sainte-Anne. Do you know how many research facilities there are at the university related to lobster? This is not a hard question to answer, at least, but you may not be aware of the kinds of things that we're able to do. I'll just wait until we get some of your feedback there to see that we have your full attention on this. And then I'm going to let you know a little bit about what those facilities actually are. Okay, 2 is the dominant answer there. Let's take a look at what our facilities actually are, so that I hope this is of interest and perhaps even a surprise to you in terms of what we're able to do here. The campus locations overall are 5 around the province. That includes our location in Petit de Gras here, in Saint-Joseph-de-Moines and Chetiquin, in Halifax, Tusket, and of course the central siège social, the main campus in Pointe-à-l'Église, Church Point. Relative to our lobster work, we have some key components attached to these labs in particular, and we're excited about this new lab that is being constructed now and being staffed at the Church Point location of the what we're calling the Lobster Quality Lab, to do the work, as I mentioned earlier, around meat yields, to do the work related to different research on the ecosystem components that are affecting our lobster stocks, lobster abundance, lobster health, etc. Our second location is one that Valerie is very well aware. Valerie was former director of the LICI, the Industry Science Lab in Soniaville, just outside Church Point. That's a nice picture of her that you'll see there. And lastly, our key lab right now, where Michelle is sitting in our facilities here in Petit de Gras. There's plenty of work that's happened around lobster. This new center gives us an opportunity to bring together under the CRIC umbrella the kind of work that we can see across the province related to lobster and our work with industry. So this is we think this is a real advantage to get us going and to move quickly into the kind of work we need to do in working with industry. As an academic, I'm going to throw at you the kinds of things that we've been involved in doing on the paperwork side, if you will. We have developed some reports already around the work we've done with the pre-season and in-season sampling work. We produced just this past year, as we have every year in the past, a summary report for the pre-season on the results of the surveys in LFA 33 and 34. I'm going to tell you some more about that later in this presentation, in the next presentation, I should say. And in the final report that was produced just recently, that's what I'll be talking about. We also have, as part of our exciting work at these different centers of the CRIC, a series of working papers. We've begun with some work on grading and decision-making that I referred to earlier in our discussions around what our research initiatives are. These are coming. These will be made public and available to our industry and our advisory board to get some comment and feedback on, and hopefully lead us in the direction that we need to go. Lastly, around links, there are many other links in these, but these include certainly our lobster sector and industry, the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, and our federal government, of course. A last question that I'll put to you before moving on, and that is on lobster quality. This is key. And so it's one that I hope that you would put some thought into. And it's probably one that we at the center are concerned most about as well. Do you believe that quality is an issue for selling live lobster in the international marketplace? So I'll leave you think about that and look for some results that you might see, but we have a ways to go, and we'll be talking more about this as well, about the nature of quality in lobster, how we define it, how we determine it, and how we can maintain it. This is something that we need to have as a common element that carries us all the way to the from harvest, from water to plate, if you will. We know it's critical, and I thank you for your feedback on this. And with that, I'm going to turn over my screen to another presenter.
Yes, thank you very much, Dan, Michelle, Maria, for your presentations. So we'll continue with our next presenter, Emily Nathan. So Emily is a laboratory technician at Université Sainte-Anne's Laboratory for Innovation in Science and Industry. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Biology and Aquatic Resources from St. FX University and has a passion for field and lab work, leading to her working proto-metal upon Nova Scotia's West Coast. Emily was a recipient of the 2020 McKenna Fellowship for her leadership and interest in sustainable development. As a research scientist, her key interests are based upon the interactions between marine organisms, their environment, and industry. Currently, Emily is investigating physiological and biomarkers within American lobsters under Dr. Mohammadi Khawass at the LICI. The research focuses on identifying different methods that can be utilized to quantify the anthropogenic stresses on key lobster populations. The mic is yours, Emily.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, as Valérie a dit, mon nom est Emily. Je travaille dans le laboratoire LICI de Sainte-Anne University. Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de recherche terminée en argument en cours pour répondre aux préoccupations de l'industrie de la pêche et de aquaculture. So, hi, as Valerie introduced me, my name is Emily. I work for the LICI lab at Sainte-Anne University. So I'll be talking about the research that we've completed and that we have been working on to address concerns brought up by the fishery industry when looking at aquaculture and lobsters. So a quick outline of what I'll be talking today. We'll be talking about the key sociological study that started off this research, and I'll play a short video on it momentarily. What the importance of continuing and building on this research, what concerns we're hoping on addressing, the research we have completed post the sociological study, and what research we're currently working on, what we're hoping all this research will go for. So please enjoy the short video.
I had just moved out to Nova Scotia for an 8-month contract here as a university professor. The university had been approached by the ministry to conduct research on lobster fishermen's concerns related to aquaculture, salmon aquaculture. And in doing so, it was a perfect opportunity to have somebody who's a sociologist conduct interviews with lobster fishermen to sort of understand what's going on with a neutral point of view. So about 35 lobster fishermen participated, 5 stakeholders, so people that were in the community that know the subject, to make sure that I also was understanding what was being said. It's the challenges of different concerns for different reasons, and then how to properly listen to those to actually put into practice what needs to be done. I think this is a social historical problem, is how do you listen correctly? You can ask questions, you can do all kinds of surveys, but can you really hear what's being asked? And can you have the resources and the imagination to create what needs to be done for people to feel heard? I think it's healthy when we're actually talking about it. It's when we stop talking about it that I really get nervous. The next step after the report came out was to try to answer some of those concerns, and so they hired universities, different researchers, to conduct environmental studies.
How deep are we here, Dave?
16.5 meters.
We're going to lower this down with the anchor, and then this will have a 5-meter tether on it, basically, from that anchor. So these are the environmental samples that's going to look at what the lobster's living in. We're looking to see what that bottom looks like with regard to the bacterial populations. When you impact a piece of bottom, it affects not only the macrofauna, the bigger animals that are there, but it also affects the smaller ones, like the bacteria. Because bacteria reproduce so quickly, you can change species in a matter of a day or two. That's why we're looking at bacteria. They're almost like real-time measurements of what's going on. So there's our first sample.
Our role in this is to provide information not only to the provincial managers, but also to the federal managers that are trying to deal with this, but also to the fishermen who have a stake in the game, right? And of course the aquaculturists, right? The salmon farmers are interested. I mean, they don't want to be damaging anything on the bottom, and if some of their practices are better than others, then they can focus on those. So they're all looking to make their businesses and their roles better.
Some other great projects we're doing too, the Canadian Shellfish Sanitation Program classifies waters around the coast as whether they're safe for harvest for shellfish which are going to be destined for human consumption. Environment Canada and Climate Change presently do most of the monitoring for this, but it's really labor intensive. So one of the ideas we had is drone technology advanced enough now to be able to go out and physically collect a water sample? So we're in the middle of doing some trials right now with drones with our partners with Fisheries and also Environment and Climate Change Canada. And right now we're just comparing to make sure that the traditional sampling methods and the drone sampling methods are telling us the same thing.
We're looking at ways of trying to do things better, but we also need to start doing more proactive and creative things in the marine environment. There's a real opportunity to produce more and varied food and healthier food in a lot of cases from the marine environment, and we want to do that in a sustainable way, that not just sustainable for the bottom line of multinational corporations, but for small mom and pop operations that can support a lot of the local communities.
So it's important we continue to build on this research to address any of the concerns that are brought up and any concerns that are brought up in the future. Lobsters are very fickle creatures. They like to migrate to better conditions, such as from warmer water to colder water. And this is also included in environmental quality. So if it has an area of poor quality, it will migrate to better, cleaner quality environments. This has caused a small shift in the lobster harvesting locations. And we want to make sure we keep those for as long as possible in Nova Scotia. It's also important to bring a holistic approach to this research, correlating different environmental functions with physical, chemical, and biological indicators. So the concerns that we are hoping to address through the research we've completed and that we're doing now is there an interaction between aquaculture and the lobster fisheries? Are the lobsters being impacted by aquaculture byproducts such as extra food, excrement, sea lice, anti-fouling, and all that? And are there key ways to identify the health of the lobster through specific biomarkers? So a study completed right after the sociological study was to look at the feasibility of rearing cages in specific sites as a way to introduce a sustainable, viable lobster population. So 3 sites were selected, as you can see on the map. So juveniles of stage 5 were placed within these cages for 13 weeks. And this experiment was to represent the feasibility of holding lobsters to evaluate any relative anthropogenic stress in those areas, as well as a way to introduce juvenile lobsters into that ecosystem. So the cages were designed by St. Anne to hold each lobster individually in small individual rearing cages. The lobsters had to be put in separately due to the fact they can be cannibalistic in nature when they are juvenile. And then the larger cage was constructed to hold all the small cages in place, but while allowing good water flow, food, and waste to circulate. These cages were required to withstand Nova Scotia's strong tidal structure, changes in salinity, and any anthropogenic stress that may come at it. Overall, the experiment was very successful. Lobsters within all 3 sites indicated very healthy growth, and there was no significant damage of wear and tear after 13 weeks in the cages. The lobsters themselves had a very low mortality rate of 30%. This indicates this experiment could be used on a larger scale to assist in the restocking of vital lobster populations, and could be used in vital areas such as in and around salmon and finfish aquaculture to evaluate environmental conditions utilizing the juvenile lobsters as an indicator species. So this is a great study. We're hoping to build and establish a baseline for this for future projects connecting with the biomarker and physiological study we're completing now. So our current research is to identify the methods that can be utilized to quantify the potential effects of finfish aquaculture on the lobster fisheries. The research has been split into 2 distinct categories. The first aspect is concentrating on the anthropogenic stress, such as looking at trace metals or benthic indicators. The second aspect is to identify the physiological and biomarkers within the lobsters, such as gene association with stress or protein concentrations. So taking a closer look at the first part, we're specifically looking at trace metal contaminants within sediment and water samples, as well as benthic conditions such as pH or oxidate redox state, which can indicate the reactivity of the sediment, how much oxygen it may contain, as well as the redox state will affect the makeup of the sediment. While the biomarkers we're specifically looking at are the henosilene concentration, methylthylene gene expression, and ACHE inhibition. The changes in gene expression can be caused by a huge amount of different environmental factors, such as metals, chemicals, stress, and even small parasites. Physiological effects can either be permanent or semi-permanent. The semi-permanent ones, moving the lobsters from a contaminated to a non-contaminated environment, we can see a drastic change within these biomarkers and in the overall lobster health. This is a great way of seeing how the environment is changing over time, as well as a quick assessment of if the finfish aquaculture changes the practice, is it working well? How is it affecting the population? And is there an overall effect? So where we're going, we're hoping we can connect all three research projects together by having a juvenile lobster within the cages under key areas under anthropogenic stress to look at, are the biomarkers being different? How are they changing? Are we seeing any different within the lobsters? And continue building upon the original sociological study. We're hoping to address all future concerns and all the concerns currently raised by the finfish and lobster fisheries and all other fishery industries. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Emily, for the great presentation. I know the time is running quickly, so I'll pass the mic to Dan. So he has a brief presentation about the ALMQ project. So Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Valerie. I have a brief discussion that I want to make about the report that we made as part of the pre-season and in-season sampling program in LFAs 33 and 34 for this year. As Adam had mentioned, we have a key player, and that is the Coldwater Lobster Association that works with us. Their technician and their administrative help were incredible this past year, as in earlier years as well. But this year in particular, we've expanded some of the work that we've done, and that's part of the story that I want to tell you about, including our connection with them through the CREC and the work that we've done in this since the database was begun in 2006. The purpose of this statement of the table of contents is not to go through this in any detail, but to let you know that there are a couple of things that we want you to be aware of. First of all, this is an expanding report. This is the first time we've included as much information we have in our final reports year after year. Secondly, there's information here that we hope and we can encourage you to look at and to be aware of, and hopefully join us via more collaboration and more work around what you think is important here, what hypotheses we need to test further, and how we can use this information to help us understand the benefits that can come to industry in its work in making quality decisions around lobster. So let me begin by getting into some of the detail around what this lobster work is about and what the data and the sampling was. So here's a basic, think of this as a data format for the lobster samples. We took information from strings of lobster traps, approximately 10 traps rather per string, and maybe 5 to 10 strings in any one sampling time and area. We look at harvested lobsters that are legal and sublegal. We only sample in detail legal lobsters. We acquire for all those legal lobsters that we capture the carapace length, sex, hardness, blood protein level measured through this refractometer here as the Brix level, the key level in our measures of quality for lobster. We also do multi-stage analysis. These are all protocols, by the way, that had been in place since 2006 around the ALMQ data set. We look at damage, lobster, culls, shell disease, other things that we might report that are important. And finally, we observe the status of whether the lobsters are considered weak or not weak. So all of this is recorded by the technician. And here's a picture of the technician taking a blood sample for Brix level, determine it through the refractometer. What we do with that Brix level is break it up, again, as protocol for the ALMQ database, into 3 indicator components. Less than 6 measure on the Brix is considered poor quality, soft, and most likely low meat counts. A medium range between 6 and 7.99 as a Brix level is medium relative to its quality, whether it is going to be fully metered or not. It's in the medium range. And lastly, anything of a Brix level count greater than 8 is considered good. These are good subjective measure that is likely to be more fully meated lobster, a lobster that's more survivable in short storage and in shipping, and is a good lobster to be consumed. This is what we're after. We're trying to make sure that we're in this range when we harvest lobsters to get that high value product. I want to let you know what the sampling locations are throughout the database. Again, to protocol. We have 4 major areas recognized as being St. Mary's Bay, Yarmouth, Lobster Bay, and Port Latour. Port Latour being the only area outside LFA 34 in LFA 33. We sample from 2 separate sub areas of these areas that we consider and call inside and outside. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of these results now. This is how we summarize the results over, and I'm showing just here the Yarmouth inside and outside results. You see there on the left-hand side the sample dates. You'll see the numbers of lobsters that were captured, as well as the number of samples that were made where we got into the detail that I mentioned in the earlier slide. The percentage there tells you what were weak and what were considered soft. And the average Brix level over here, that tells us what those lobsters sampled on that date and that location were as a Brix level. And it's that value, that Brix, that we look at in terms of how things change. So we had 52 pre-season sample dates and areas, 8 in-season sample dates for a total of 60. We sampled approximately 28,000 lobsters. And sampled, I should say we harvested 28,000 lobsters and sampled about 10,000 for an average overall Brix of over 8. Here's a picture now, and I'll spend just a few seconds on some of these pictures. I have a series of graphics that I want to show you. This is a picture of Yarmouth. Yarmouth inside and outside. These top 2 graphs here are outside sample dates. These bottom lines down here are inside sample dates. And we're looking at the total counts of lobsters that were harvested, legal and sublegal. There's a characteristic pattern here that Yarmouth bears out, and we'd see this in the other areas as well, where the outside areas, male and female, that's what we're seeing in these 2 clips, male on top, female on the bottom here, they tend to increase in the outside areas, the harvest amount, and fall down into the in-season. This period's here being in-season samples for Yarmouth. In the inside areas, we have a different pattern. There's a slightly different mix. Males and females are a little bit different in the outside areas. In the inside areas, they were initially, and they tend to come together. So they're not much different over time, but their harvest amounts are much lower relative to the outside areas for Yarmouth. This tends to be consistent with the other areas too. What does this tell us? This is an overall question that we can ask, set a hypothesis, and do further testing on. But it's something that we're interested in seeing in terms of the in-season behavior of lobsters in these different areas. Here's another picture that talks about Lobster Bay. This is Lobster Bay counts, both in the inside and the outside areas. So the inside areas are here on the first graph. You'll see these are pairwise samples. So we did inside, then we did outside. And what you notice is that for Brix, the Brix level seemed to be initially higher in the inside areas, initially higher in the outside areas and lower in the inside areas. Then later on, when we hit into October, for example, here, we see a flip occurring, and the outside areas have higher bricks, the inside areas have lower bricks. There's a slight flip between the different counts inside and outside that we see here in these lines. And this is to be considered as what? What does this mean? How do we deal with this? It raises a question that I'm going to ask you in a second here. But first, I want you to look at Port Latour. This is Port Latour outside. A couple of things in this graphic that I want to show you. In the early part of the series of sampling, in the preseason area, being in August and September, we had a difficult time finding lobsters. The technician did, I should say, finding lobsters in Port Latour. That's LFA 33, you remember. And there was some concern about, hey, what's going on? We're not even finding lobsters out here to sample in Port Latour in those early days. That changed later, and Port Latour really came up. What was interesting, though, was you'll see these high bricks numbers for lobsters in Port Latour, even though they were few in number. What we do note in this, in terms of the stages, is that most of the stages we see at this point in the survey and this point in the year are non-active relative to molt, so 0 stages, very few up in stages 2 to 2.5. And so we generally have the understanding that there's not molt activity going on over this period in this location. So this is the third graphic that I have relative to hardness. This hardness information that we collected in this particular case is for St. Mary's Bay. We have information here in these are inside areas for St. Mary's Bay and outside areas. In the outside areas, like Port Latour, we had some difficulty getting samples initially. In the later in-season times, we got more samples because we wanted to get that information. The protocol calls for 150 samples to measure hardness scale that we took in general terms over the course of the survey in the inside and outside areas for St. Mary's Bay. What this sees, and you see just a blank, a single color here. This single color is an indication that most of the time, and when I say most, I mean 90% and more, the technician is measuring the hardness of these lobsters in St. Mary's Bay, inside and outside, over all days of the survey as hard. There's very little, and you see a slight little bit of orange down here. That's a medium scale hardness. There's not a lot of information to be had in the hardness measures, what we're seeing here. So I would put this question to you, and I'd ask your impression on this. Did I flip that question? Val, I put this question to you now relative to our interpretation of this data. Does shell hardness, in your view, convey reliable information about lobster quality? Certainly the indication that we see, and I'll talk over your submissions as you go through this, but certainly the indication that we see is that most of the time we're getting hard as an indicator for the shell hardness and the manual method of determining that for all of our lobster samples. And that information is, doesn't distinguish as much as we thought it should otherwise. So this is a mixture, and I think that's an indication that we've got to do some homework on how we deal with hardness and understand better how that might relate to things like bricks levels and other things that would give us another way to think about quality, as hardness does as well. Okay, moving on. This is a picture now of all outside areas. So this is my first comparative chart, if you will, that occurs in the report that talks about the difference between the different areas. I see Yarmouth in yellow here at the top. This is St. Mary's Bay in blue. Lobster Bay over here, and this is Port Latour. The small numbers we saw in the early days of Port Latour are showing up here as accounts of lobsters harvested over this time. Certainly, it seems to be the case that Yarmouth was not as good as Lobster Bay in the early days of the survey, but lobster in Yarmouth picked up, and we harvested more in the absence of the commercial fishery over this period to the left of that blue, light blue line, and into the in-season samples that we had in St. Mary's Bay and Yarmouth, we see this decline, as you might expect. Okay, this is a graph that I'd like some attention on to you here. This is there you see Port Latour with those high Brix values that I mentioned earlier in the early part of the series. This is St. Mary's Bay. This is Yarmouth, and these are the counts and the Brix levels that you see here that are recorded. So we've got this characteristic, what I call a U shape over the pre-season that occurs with the in most areas. What is this? Why are we seeing it that way? This is important because when we get closer to the end here before the season starts, we'd like to be able to say what we're seeing in terms of Brix levels in each of the areas so that we can have a prediction going into the season what Brix looks like. So is this pattern characteristic? Is this something that we can learn from and decide relative to what our predictions is going into this season? So here's another question for you. What do the U-shaped average Brix values for lobsters over the pre-season sampling period signify? Is it a possible second molt? Is there evidence of food restriction that may have an impact on Brix? Are there shifts in temperatures, climate change, or general terms? Or do we not know? This is certainly something that we would like to talk to all constituent shareholders, harvesters, processors that might have some ideas about what we think is happening there and how we might deal with that as we move forward and predict. So your feedback on this one would be certainly of interest to me and all of us who are looking at these numbers. Anxiously waiting to see your results. Unknown. Yeah, it's. I think generally things seem to be unknown too. We've got to know more. We've got to look more at this, and this is certainly a question that this report raises, and the sampling work that we do in the presentations here raise as well. So thank you for that. I'm almost finished. Let me just give you an idea that we have in our report this year for the first time information on buried females. This is St. Mary's Bay. And you'll see the in-season sampling period, and the pre-season sampling period in white here, and the in-season sampling period in St. Mary's Bay in light blue. We don't see a lot of activity, as you would expect. There's not a lot of egg activity in the pre-season. That starts to pick up, it appears, later into January here, into the in-season period. There's more work that we need to do to understand what these stages are, what they mean relative to the molt pattern, and how we can use this in-season information to tell us more about that. So we have this, of course, for the other location sites as well. Similar patterns, similar low-level counts, or we're talking 2s and 4s here in terms of numbers and low levels on this. Okay, my last piece of information, I want to report to you, General. This is kind of a summary of all of the Brix level information that occurs at each of the sampling dates for a particular area. This happens to be Yarmouth outside. And the way you want to look at this is an indication of the Brix. You see these average Brix numbers here in these white boxes. With high Brix, that's the values greater than 8 and low values less than 6 in red, high values green. So we've got this pattern over Yarmouth that says that we're moving forward in a not very good way. Reds are increasing, greens are staying the same or even going down. Then all of a sudden, what we saw in 2002 was that come mid-November, we saw very high, positive, very good Brix levels. Now that's what occurred for Yarmouth. It's on Yarmouth outside. It was similar in other areas as well. This is a picture of what happens when we look at over time. Now this is from the ALMQ survey from 2012 all the way through to 2020. And you recognize this last graphic as one I showed in the previous graph for 3 to 4 weeks before the start of the season. So there's a general pattern here, and this information is helpful for us to predict what's going to happen 3 weeks from now when the season starts. It doesn't look good from here, and it looks like we're deteriorating in Yarmouth outside since 2012. But we did have this year this very high survey peak surge, if you will, that occurred in the middle of November that we reported overall. So I'm going to end with this point, and that is that a lot of people feel that in our questioning and presenting these data, a lot of people feel that the quality results as interpreted by the BRICS levels, which you see in all these scattered areas here by these different areas, is the inverse of what we see in terms of harvests, the deep red line that you see here. So when harvests are high, is it the case that quality is low, BRICS levels are low? Now, it's evidently confusing here. This is the linear line of the harvest. This is a linear line of the BRICS. As harvest seems to go trend increasing over time since 2012, BRICS seems to go down. It's difficult to say if there's a pattern there around quality, and that represents my last question and my last point in this presentation overall. So do you believe, this is feedback that we'd like to get from you, are the total harvest of lobster in LFA 34 related to lobster quality? If quality goes up, does lobster harvest go down and vice versa? What do you think? Be curious to know your feedback on this. And while we're just waiting for this to finish, Valerie, I'll end off here and just say that there are a lot of number of elements that we're looking at in our report overall, including different hypotheses and other things that we can do with this data. We would certainly welcome any kind of discussion and opportunity to speak with industry members, collaborators, participants on this presentation to get some feedback and to know more about this. Wow. Kind of mixed results, not surprising, but thank you very much for your feedback on this. I need to end off here, and I'll do so, Valerie, if you'll let me go. And I need to say that thank you to Coldwater for their work and for your assistance in working with us on this. Thank you. Over to you, Val.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan, for the detailed presentation. So we have about 3 minutes for Q&A, chat. For all the panelists, be prepared. And if you guys have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen or the chat function. And we can answer maybe like 1 or 2 questions before we end this session. So maybe I'll start with a question. This question might be for Dan or Michelle. So we talk about improving the quality of the lobster, but how do we improve the quality? Are we not just maintaining it? Like, how does it work?
I guess I can just say quick that, yeah, I've always, my view has always been we can't ever improve quality. Once it's landed on the boat, that's as best it's ever going to be. But, the things that we do to it, the handling practices and the holding conditions, they have a big impact on quality. So the better, the better we can handle the lobster and the better we can, systems that we have, we can maintain or preserve that quality for a longer period of time. And that really ultimately is our goal.
Thank you, Michelle, for this. So if you guys don't have any more questions, be free to send an email our way, contact us. So for this presentation, I really like to thank our sponsors and the panelists, of course, who gave excellent presentations, but most of all, all of you guys who attended this presentation. So on this note, we'll end this 1 minute short. And have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.